There are moments in life when we suddenly realize we no longer feel at ease in small talk, in social gatherings that only skim the surface. Out there, many relationships seem to exist only to fill a void, to maintain a perfect image. Yet inside, a quiet voice whispers, "This is not where I belong." That is when we begin to withdraw, to fall silent. And that silence itself becomes a mirror that unsettles those around us. They no longer see the reflection they expect, while we slowly step into another journey, the journey inward, toward truth and the deeper value of who we are. This withdrawal is often misunderstood as coldness or distance. In reality, it is a sign that the soul is seeking healing. Carl Jung emphasized that when a person is no longer caught in the role of pleasing others, they inevitably confront the shadow, the rejected parts of the self that actually hold the keys to true growth. During this stage, one may feel adrift, as if the world no longer resonates. Old friends may drift away, familiar conversations lose their meaning, and loneliness creeps into daily moments. Yet within that loneliness, a door quietly opens. The door that allows us to hear the inner call, rather than chasing approval from the outside. Entering this journey often brings waves of deep unease. Habits that once brought comfort suddenly fail, and relationships once thought solid reveal their dependency and falseness. This is when the shadow, in Jung's sense, rises with its full weight. It does not come to destroy, but to illuminate. It forces us to see the truth, that we have allowed others to define our worth, that we have lived by expectations instead of by essence. The emptiness, the pain, the feeling of being stuck, these are not endings. They are invitations. For only through this collapse can a person rebuild themselves on foundations of honesty and strength. In this pause, a subtle shift begins. Instead of rushing to fill the emptiness with the attention of others, one learns to sit quietly with it. And there, they discover that pain is not only a burden, it is also a teacher. Tears once seen as weakness become doors to compassion. Bursts of anger reveal wounds that were never heard. This is the threshold Jung called the beginning of individuation, the slow dissolving of the old self and the forming of a larger, truer being. No longer chasing the gaze of the world, they begin to understand that real peace can only be nurtured from within. And then, when the first light begins to rise from within, a transformation takes place, not loud, but profound. A person realizes that not everyone can walk with them on this new path. Relationships built on pretense or dependence naturally fade, leaving behind a space that feels both frightening and liberating. Yet it is precisely that space which clears the way for authentic connections, for people who come not to take or demand, but to walk beside, to bring light to each other. At this stage, presence is no longer driven by the hunger for praise, but by a quiet steadiness. And strangely enough, it is this very stillness that draws others near, for in it, they feel safe, seen, and free of judgment. When a person reaches this state, they begin to live with a rare kind of freedom. Freedom from the need to please everyone. Freedom from being shaken by criticism or attack. Instead of reacting with anger or retreat when facing injustice, they can stand firm, looking directly at the situation with clearer eyes. Jung reminded us that the shadow is not an enemy, but the forgotten part of the self. When we dare to face it, we don't just see old wounds, we discover a hidden strength we never knew we possessed. Sensitivity, once felt like a burden, now becomes an advantage. They can feel deeply without drowning, empathize without losing their boundaries. Life no longer feels like a battle against the dark, but a journey of integration to become whole. The greatest change is not in the outer world, but in the way the inner life reflects outward. Relationships begin to shift. Someone once caught in endless cycles of tension now carries a quiet steadiness, and those around them feel safer in their presence. Instead of fueling more conflict, they become a source of balance. At work, under pressure or fierce competition, they are no longer driven to prove themselves at all costs. They know what is truly worth protecting and what is only illusion. This is the power of awakening. When a person is no longer led by unconscious reactions, but chooses their responses with awareness. Jung called this a step toward individuation, where the self is no longer ruled by hidden shadows, but begins to guide its own life. With persistence, this transformation radiates outward like an invisible field. Others feel the difference, not through fancy words, but through the calm energy that flows from within. A person who once angered easily now sits quietly in the middle of argument, softening the storm around them. Someone once consumed by anxiety becomes a pillar for their family, simply because they have learned to stand steady within themselves. This is not an unreachable ideal, but the natural result of daring to do the inner work with one's shadow. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When someone has the courage to face their anger, envy, and fear, they are no longer secretly ruled by them. Instead, they learn to transform them into wisdom, strength, and compassion. And this transformation gives rise to a deep, magnetic presence, a kind of energy that draws others in, because it is the energy of a soul at peace with itself. This brings a freedom many spend their lives searching for. No longer needing to prove themselves or beg for recognition, they feel as though a 1,000-pound weight has been lifted. They don't need to race for position or wear masks to be loved. Instead, they live simply, honestly, and with quiet strength. And in a world driven by competition and comparison, that very peace becomes their greatest magnetism. The remarkable thing is that this attraction does not come from controlling others, but from mastering oneself. In the face of challenge, they keep their heart from being swept away by anger. They move through pain without turning it into hatred. They stop seeing others as enemies to fight, and instead as mirrors reflecting what they still need to see in themselves. Every conflict becomes an opportunity to grow, every wound a stepping stone toward wholeness. At this level, their very presence becomes a form of silent healing. Others don't need them to offer advice. Just being near is enough to feel calmer, as if an invisible door had opened and everyone could finally breathe more easily. This is the inner magnetic field Jung spoke of, not the power to control, but the power to touch the soul of another through steadiness and sincerity. In daily life, it shows up in small but lasting ways. They don't need to be the center of attention at a party, yet their presence softens the noise and warms the space. They don't need to prove their worth with grand promises, yet those who share their life feel safe and steady. This is not fleeting charm. It is an attraction that outlasts age, beauty, or status. It comes from the depth of a soul that has faced its darkness, endured its wounds, and chosen to turn them into light. True magnetism is not about trying to stand out, but about the quiet peace of a soul shaped through shadow. Without needing to prove, they carry into every space a subtle energy. Those nearby feel lighter, as if an unseen burden had dissolved. This is not magic, but the fruit of a brave journey, one of facing oneself, acknowledging the wounds, and transforming them into compassion. Once reconciled with their own shadow, a person attracts not through appearance or words, but through presence. A presence that makes others trust, open, and stay. And perhaps this is the most precious gift in a turbulent age. A heart that can hold stillness for itself and spread peace to others. It is more than attraction. It is the refined wisdom Jung spoke of, the quiet light that endures because it shines from within. If today's reflection has given you a sense of relief or a new way of seeing more deeply, I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, not just to hear more of Jung's teachings, but to help keep this inner flame alive in a world that so often forgets its light.